How's it going, guys? What we're going to do in this video is actually talk about trends. If you have been around the building automation world for any length of time, you know that trends can be a very useful troubleshooting tool. It can tell you what's going on in your system and so on. And what we're going to do here in this video is actually talk a little bit about how you can set up trends within Metasys Mui. For example, if I wanted to look at a temperature on something and see what the history of that temperature is, I can simply click that point, and I have this little box right here within my window. And this, if I click it, will bring up the trend for that point if there is one. And you can see here that we do have trend data. This is where data is being tracked on this particular point. And I can see history just depending on how I have it configured, which we're going to talk about that, so stick around for the video, the full video. We're going to talk about how to do that in just a moment. But what we have here, this particular point is a chilled water return temperature, and you can see all of the values here, how it's kind of coming down here, and it dropped down and then spiked back up here, and so on. And another thing about Metasys Mui is whenever you click a trend, it's going to actually build out this list for you for a while, as long as you're logged in. Now, if you log out, it basically starts from scratch. But when you are logged into the system, whenever you click on a trend, it's going to keep adding it to this window over here to the right. And you can actually go over and select one of these and hit the apply button, and it's actually going to pull that particular trend in with the trend that you were looking at, the last one that you had clicked. And what we have with these two trends are supply and return temperature for chilled water for this particular building. And you can kind of see how it does it here within this. We can see the graph as far as what has happened as far as the time frame and so on. And it gives you a lot of data. We can see all of the little spikes. We can see everything that is happening within our system. And the reason that we have this spike is we actually had earlier over at our chiller plant, our central chiller plant, when the machines actually staged up, that always it elevates that temperature for a brief period of time before it gets it back down to where it needs to be. And that is something that can be very useful when troubleshooting. And to give you a little bit more, we're going to take a look at some of these points that we have here. Depending on the type of data that you're looking at, depending on how you want that data presented, you do have a few options here. For example, I can click this box here, and it's going to change it to basically a bar graph. Now, that it can be useful for some points, for some people especially, just depending on what you're doing with your data. You can also, if I go back to this other point, I want to show you something else as well. You have a lot of options as far as how you can customize this, depending on, if you're going to do some comparisons of different data types, such as an enable, disabled, or whatever, you can select this little window here. And what it's going to do is basically it's going to give you a side-by-side comparison between different temperatures or different points. And I can just grab one of these other values and drop it in here, and you can see what that has done. It's basically put that onto this lower plane here. We're going to look at a few others as we go through this, just to kind of show you how you can use some of these tools within the system. Now let's look at this air handler to give you a little better understanding. For example, I want to know if a particular point, what my discharge temperature is, as well as I want to do a comparison between whether or not my supply fan is actually running. And this is just another example of how you can use the graphs and some of the points within Metasys Trends. Again, I'm going to pull up this discharge temperature. I'm going to click my little box, and it is going to bring up this window. It also still has all of those other windows, those other points that I looked at earlier. What I want to do now is I'm just going to close this one out. And I'm going to go down to my supply fan status, and I'm going to click that. Now, once I click into here, I get the same option. I'm going to click that little box, and it's going to tell me the status of that supply fan. Now, when I overlay that discharge temperature of that unit with the supply fan, let's look at what it does for me. You can see it here. It's already broken out. Basically, I have two different panels here, so it's trying to interpret what it thinks I want. But I'm going to go ahead and hit this little button here, and it basically separates it on out. That way it just makes it a little cleaner, so on. There's not much difference with these particular points, but you can get some points out there when you're trying to look at your data and see what's going on. It's going to be kind of jumbled up, and by separating it out, it's going to make it a little bit cleaner, and it's going to help you to interpret what's going on just a little bit better. You can see here we had this particular unit on and off a little bit. You can see the discharge temperature. You can see it very elevated. We had a high discharge temperature on this air handler due to an issue. However, after we got that issue resolved, the discharge temperature started coming down, and it finally got back down into normal range. So this is how you can use trends to kind of see what's going on with the unit, and it can help you when you're trying to do troubleshooting. You know, if you have a water source coming from somewhere else, if you're trying to figure out any changes within your system that could have contributed to an issue, that's where data trends can come in very handy. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go over and look at how to set up trends within Metasys Mui. Now we're looking at a chilled water system. We'd recently gone through and replaced the controller on this system. And with all of the changes that was made, we need to go back in and add some data trends to where we can tell a little bit more about what is happening within our system. If I were to click on this point, now we're looking at the network tree. For those of you guys that are not familiar with it, I've got videos where I talk about that on my channel. So go over and check those out on my channel. I'm going to go in here and click that block again, and it's going to bring up the trend that we have available. This is one that just literally got set up earlier today, so we do not have a lot of data in it, but as it runs, it will be collecting data over time. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you a little bit about how that is when you set one of these up. So I'm going to click over here on this point, and it's going to identify that point over in the network tree. And you can see here on the left hand side of my screen, it highlights the particular point that we're looking at, and it also shows me down here the extension. This is the trend extension that we have on this point. So if I click on it, it basically is just going to show me the trend here as far as that data that we had already seen. But if I go into page 2, this little upper right hand corner here, we have multiple pages. You can customize this within your system depending on how you set up Metasys Mui. I'll see about doing some more videos on how to do that in the near future. If there's any that you want to see in particular, let me know down in the comments below. I'm going to click on page 2. What this is going to do is actually give me some of the configuration data for this trend. You can see the status as far as whether it is enabled. I can also see the whether if I want to run a trend for a particular start time, a particular stop time, I could go in and set that up here depending on what I'm needing for my data. I can set it up to where if the buffer's full to stop, you know, there's a lot you can do. Your sample interval is something that you need to pay attention with. This is how often it is going to grab the data. Depending on how often you need that data to be tracked, that's where this number is going to be come into play, you know, and it is in seconds. For example, if you wanted some type of data that you needed it captured every minute, so that's going to be 60 seconds. There again, it's a second time base. But at the same time, what you need to remember within your system, if you got a lot of trends that have a very short sample interval, your network engine is going to start slowing down. It will slow down and bog these things down. I mean, it's just like any computer. If you have it running a bunch of processes all at once, it is going to slow it down. So that's something that you need to be very careful of. You know, you don't want to slow it down to the point that it becomes unusable. I have seen network engines where literally trends would be accidentally set up for one reason or another, where it would have trends for like down to 1 second. If you do that on a bunch of points, your network engine is going to basically lock up. It's not going to do very well. It's going to crash. Let me just put it that way. So you'll need to go in and clean those out. And you can have multiple trends for the same point. I could literally go in here and add a second trend point to this if I wanted to. But for now, we're not going to do that. We're just going to go ahead and look at some of the other points that I do want to add trends to. So what we have here, we're going to look at both binary and analog points. And I'm going to show you how we typically set them up and give you an idea of why that is. And you can do it however you need it for your system. But for our system, this is just how we set these up. And again, but depending on the amount of trends that you have in your system, again, it's going to load that network engine up. So kind of be cautious about that. This is the system enable point. This is our main on switch for the system. That is something that I do want to add a trend on. I want to know when that system comes up, if I have an issue with an air handler not cooling properly, or if it wasn't cooling properly for a certain period of time. And I want to check the state of the chilled water system. So I'm going to click this point here. It's going to highlight it over here in the left-hand side on the network tree. And this is where it gets fun. This is where we add that. This plus sign right here with this highlighted in the window in the network tree, I'm simply going to hit the plus sign. When I hit the plus sign, it is going to bring up this box. And this is where we add our extensions, our point extensions within Metasys Mui. This is going to ask, the first thing is going to ask the type of extension that I want, or it's going to ask what I want, and naturally it's going to be an extension. I jumped ahead of myself. The object type, and this is where I can select either an alarm, I can do an average, I can do load, I can do totalization, and trend. Okay, trend is what I want for this particular point. Check out my channel. We'll talk about some of these others there. So I'm going to select trend, and it's going to give me the opportunity to select the different point attribute. Well, the main thing here is I want to know that value, but I do have that option of selecting a different point attribute depending on what's going on, what I need as far as data. And again, for this point, what I need is I want to know that value. And I'll tell you, when you're setting these trends up, present value is what you're going to use probably 99.9% of the time. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the next button. And it brings me to this window here. This is my configuration window. I can give this a custom name right here. This is where you can go in and call it whatever you want. I'll just call it system enable. Let's type that in. I do want it to be true, and this is where I could turn that trend on and off if I did not want it to capture data. Obviously, we're going to be building this trend out. We want it to be able to capture data. I could go in here and set a specific start time or end time, just like I had mentioned before. And I simply go in here, I can select the calendar, and I can make this run for a set period of time or just whatever I need it to do. But for this, we're not going to be doing it that way. But that can come in handy if you're doing some type of a trend study, if you're wanting to do something where you have a lot of data, where there again, if you're wanting to see what's happening within the system minute by minute, you can set those trends up to where they run that fast and only run for so long just to help keep from loading up your system. But again, that's where that can come into play. Your buffer size, I typically leave that alone. It is basically going to be adding or setting the amount of memory that you're wanting to allow for trends. If you wanted to shut the trend off once it filled up the buffer, you would select that here. This is your sample interval. It comes up at 600 seconds defaulted. You can put this to whatever you need it to be. But I want you to pay attention to these 2 points. We have sample interval and COV increment, client COV increment. This is going to capture, regardless of whatever it is, whatever time you put in here, that is when that trend is going to capture the data. I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to enter a value of 0 here. Now, what's that going to do for us? Basically, what I want to do, I don't necessarily want it to capture, since this is a binary, since it's just either on or off, I don't want it to capture based on a particular time period, even though I could. I want it to capture on a state change, and that is where this comes into play. What you could actually do here, since this is just an on and off, I'm simply going to enter a 1 right in here. What that's going to do for me is when that point changes state, regardless of the time, it's going to capture that change. Okay, basically true and false. That's all I've got on here. When it goes to true from false, it's going to capture it. And it's going to log that time. When it goes from false to true, same thing. That's what happens here. Now, how can you use this? Another way you can use this, if I had this on an analog point, which we'll get to here in a moment, I can actually set this to where it's only going to capture every whatever, however many seconds, 600 seconds or whatever, at a change of, if it's the temperature, it can be 10 degrees. I could set that at whatever I needed it to be as well, but we'll get more into that here in a bit. This is your repository enable. It comes out set as false. Okay, if you have this on a server, which if you don't have it on connected to a server, connect up to a server, and that's the way you can get your graphics and all that fun stuff. This is where you can have it to offload from the network engine to your server. And that's what we're going to do. I'm going to set this to true. That means once the trends are captured, after it gets to a certain level, it's basically going to transfer that data over to the server. And that way you can store it for much longer term. There's only so much memory in these network engines, and after so long, the older data, it just falls off. It just does not, it just doesn't exist anymore. It just eliminates it and just overwrites it. And you have on down here, most of this other configuration stuff, you're not going to mess with. Okay, I'll just tell you, you're just simply not going to mess with it. You can get in there to the notify threshold and all that, and I'll be telling you guys, I've been doing this for a long time, and I rarely mess with any of this other stuff. Okay, so just don't worry about it. Just leave it like it is if you're trying to set up a basic trend. And I'm going to hit create, and you're going to see it here on the left-hand side. It is now populated here, and it's going to take me into the window. And it's going to take it just a minute, and you're going to see I currently have the current state of this data, but I don't have any data yet because I just created this trend. Okay, it's going to take it some cycles since the way that we have this set up before it's going to actually capture any data. Again, I do have the option of going in here if I need to change something. If I needed to change that time base or anything, I simply go back up, go to page 2, and I can scroll down here and do whatever I need to do. But again, this is how we need this set up. I want it dumping that information to the server. I want it capturing just when it goes from false true to true to false, just when there is a state change. Each time that there is a state change, that's when I want this data to capture. So now we're going to move on to an analog point. The next trend that I'm going to be adding is on my condenser water. Okay, this is something that is an analog value, any kind of a temperature or anything like that. It's an analog value. So what I'm going to do is simply click on it, and it's going to bring me again to the network tree and highlight the point. And I'm simply going to hit my plus sign again. Once I hit that, it's going to give me my window. I'm going to select extension, and then I'm going to select the extension type, and we're going to select trend. And once that populates, of course, I want to leave that on the present value. Again, that is going to be what you use 99.9% of the time. I'm going to select next, and it's going to give me my configuration window. And you can see here is basically just like what we had done before, only what I'm going to do is for my sample interval for this, I'm going to set it up for 1800 seconds. That is what we typically set up a lot of our trends for, just depending on the building, just depending on what we're trying to do. And it seems to work out for us. But again, guys, each system is a little bit unique. We do have some to where we're capturing trends a lot more frequently, and we do have some points that are, I guess you could say, very sensitive. So we do try to track a lot of data on them. But for this, 1800 seconds, it's going to work out fine for us. Again, the client COV, if I entered a value in here, I could set it up to where it's only going to capture like if I put a 10 in here, it's only going to capture a change of every 10 degrees. And that's another way that you can kind of filter it out. Like if you did not want it fluctuating to where it's capturing like every little minute amount, You can enter a value here. For example, if I had a trend on something and I did not want it to, if it was toggling, if it was something that was toggling like a 1/10 of a percent or something like that, and I did not want it capturing just a change unless it was a dramatic change, I can enter that value here. So that's what you would do here. But for this, we're going to leave it like it is. Again, I'm going to set the repository, I'm going to set that for true. That is going to take all of the trends that is captured by this, and it's going to send them to our server to where we can store that data for a much longer period of time. I'm going to go down here, I'm going to select create, and that is going to create that trend for us. Again, it's going to pull us into that trend, and it's going to display nothing because it has not captured any data yet. But what we're going to do is we can keep going, and you can do this within SCT, and that is something that I'll do in another video because you need to be kind of cautious about that because there's things that you can cause problems with if you're not very cautious when doing this in SCT. Basically, if you are going to set all of your trends the same, you would go in, create the trend in SCT, and then you can copy and paste that extension onto similar points. For example, if I wanted to capture all of those points with a that are analog, that are temperature, I can simply take that one trend and I can simply paste it onto all of those others and then download that network engine. That's where things get interesting depending on how your system is set up. For example, right now, with this particular system, I cannot do that because of the way that it makes the system respond if I were to download that engine. I would end up basically shutting down a couple of systems up there that I do not need to shut down right now. So we're not going to be doing that with this particular building. Other buildings, things like that, which I'll show in a future video, I'll show you how to do that within SCT. Now we're going to take a look at how we use trends on a meter. And again, this is just us. This is my meter object, and I have added a trend to it. And now let's look a little bit at how the configuration is on this. So I'm going to go up, drop down to page 2 to where I can get into the details. As you all know, if you have set these meters up, you do know that within these meters, there are different attributes. This is one of those times to where we have set this up to look at a specific attribute within the meter. And since this is already set up, you just kind of see some of the stuff that we have in here as far as our trends. And this is, since it is a power meter, this is something that we're wanting to keep data for a long period of time. And you can see right here, this is the attribute that I have this trend set up on. You know, where we had gone in before and I showed you where the value, the particular value for the attribute was set to present value, which is going to be used the majority of the time. Within this one, and just to show you an example, I'm just going to start another trend. I'm not actually going to add it, but I want to show you. I'm going to go to extension, object type, I'm going to select trend, and then the attribute. Since we have different blocks basically within this meter object, I have all these different attributes. I have consumption, I have calculation, I have just all kinds of different attributes that I had mentioned before. For that particular meter, the way that we have it set up, we changed that to consumption. Okay, we've changed that attribute, okay, because of the way what we needed and what we're using this trend for. Again, I want this to capture the usage of this particular meter. So we'll go back to here, and I've got it set up basically to take a reading once each day. I'm going to drop this down and I'm going to select 30 days. From the time that this meter starts running, and it will get reset at the first of every month. You can see it here. At the first of every month, it gets reset back to 0. As it runs throughout the month, you can see here as it just climbs each day, and it captures what that meter reading is all the way up until it reaches the end of the month and then gets reset. Okay, because it is capturing it on the consumption, This really makes it nice because I can see exactly what's going on there, even though we do have the data pulled out and written into a value that we can see, we can use for other reporting and stuff like that. This is kind of a backup in case I have a report failure for whatever reason. And I can go in and select a various range. I can go in and select the entire year. I can go in and set up a custom date range to pull the data from. And you can see here what we have as far as our consumption, and then you can see a major drop in that consumption. And there's reasons for this because of what's been going on in the building. And you can see that it is a major change. And I can actually go in here and zoom in and zoom out. Just to show you that again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply hover over right here. I'm going to click and I'm going to drag. And you can see where it's highlighting that blue. And then once I let go, it is going to pull that up for me. Just like this, here we are, and I can see my value, and then it shows me where I am in the graph. I can actually go in here, click and drag if I wanted to. I can shorten that up. There's a lot that you can do with this trend. Okay, just click and drag and so on. I can also go in here, and I can have this to spit out data either as a CSV or a PDF, just depending on what you need for your system. For example, if I wanted to spit the data out, I just select PDF, and it's going to take just a few minutes for it to process everything and then create the PDF file. We typically use Excel. We'll use it as a CSV just because of some of the reporting and things like that. But it is a very useful tool either way. It just really depends on what you're wanting to do within your system, how you use your system, and so on. But the PDF files can be very nice, particularly if you want to show the graphs and so on. I'm not sure. Again, it takes it a few minutes to generate a PDF file. Not sure why it hasn't popped up just yet, but there again, this is probably getting a lot of data pulled from this particular point. Here we go. Let's go ahead and click this and open it. It created it for us twice. But you can see here, this is the Metasys trend export, and it's got all of our data recorded in here. It shows the graph, and you do get more data in the Excel file, the CSV. You do get more data on that. I can't open it on this machine because we are not running Excel on this particular machine that we are seeing in front of you here. But again, this is something that can be very useful. You can set up reports this way, just depending on what you're needing to do, trend reports and so on. So that's kind of the basis of how we use some of the trending that we have out there. You can use it for comparing devices, comparing points across your system. It's just all about how you want to use the data. But again, guys, this is just a basic setup of some of the trends, how you set them up, just a brief overview, and so on. If you've got any questions, leave those down in the comments below. Also, guys, be sure to check out all of the links down below. You can go and help out the channel by buying stuff through those affiliate links. Guys, thanks for watching. Leave me any questions down below. Share the video. That really helps. Guys, we'll see you next time.